On a high column above the city stood a statue of Mayor Jack. Jack was covered from top to bottom with leaves of pure gold. Instead of eyes, he had sapphires, and a large scarlet ruby shone on the hilt of his sword. Everyone admired Jack. "He is as beautiful as a rooster weathercock," said a city councillor, eager to be known as a fine connoisseur of the arts. "But of course the weathercock is more useful," he immediately added, fearing that he might be accused of impracticality, of which he was not guilty. "Try to be like Mayor Jack," persuaded the gentle mother of her little boy, who kept crying to be given the moon. "Mayor Jack is never capricious." "I'm glad there's one lucky man in the world," mumbled to himself as he gazed at this beautiful statue. "Ah, he looks like an angel," admired the orphanage girls as they crowded out of the cathedral in bright purple pelerines and clean snow-white aprons. "How do you know that?" objected the math teacher. "You've never seen angels." "Oh, we often see them in our dreams," echoed the orphanage girls, and the math teacher frowned and looked at them sternly. He did not like that the children were dreaming. Swift was flying through that city one night. Her friends, now in their 7th week, had left for Egypt, and she had lingered here because she was in love with a supple, beautiful girl. In the early spring, she saw her chasing a big yellow moth, and she froze, suddenly enchanted by the slimness of her girlish body. "Would you like me to love you?" asked Swift from the first word, as she liked everything straightforward. And the cane bowed to her in return. Then Swift began to whirl over it, occasionally touching the water and leaving behind her silver streams. This was her way of expressing her love, and so it went on all summer. "What a ridiculous connection," chirped the other swallows. "After all, the reed has not a penny and a whole bunch of relatives." Indeed, the whole river was thickly overgrown with reeds. Then came the fall, and the swallows all flew away. When they all flew away, Swift felt orphaned, and this attachment to the reed seemed to her very heavy. "My God, because she is like a mute, not a word cannot get from her," said with reproach Swift. "And I'm afraid that she is a coquette, flirts with every breeze." And it is true. As soon as there is a breeze, the reed bends and bows. "She may be a homebody, but I love traveling, and my wife should love traveling too." "Well, will you fly with me?" at last she asked, but the reed only shook her head. She was so attached to home. "Ah, you have played with my love," cried Swift. "Farewell, then. I fly to the pyramids." And she flew away. All day long she flew, and by nightfall she arrived in the city. "Where should I stay here?" Swift wondered. "I hope the city has already prepared to meet me properly." Then she saw a statue behind a tall column. "Good. This is where I'll settle down. It's a great location and plenty of fresh air." And she nestled at Mayor Jack's feet. "I have a golden bedroom," she said softly, looking around. And she had already settled down to sleep and tucked her head under her wing when suddenly a heavy drop fell on her. How strange! She was surprised. Not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are so clear, so clear. How could it rain? This northern climate is terrible. My cane loved the rain, but she's so selfish. Another drop fell here. What good is a statue if it can't even keep out the rain? I'm going to find shelter somewhere by the chimney on the roof. So Swift decided to fly away, but she had not spread her wings yet. As the third drop fell, Swift looked up, and what did she see? Mayor Jack's eyes were filled with tears. Tears were rolling down his gilded cheeks, and so beautiful was his face in the glow of the moonbeams that Swift was filled with pity. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am Mayor Jack. But why are you crying?" You have drenched me through and through. When I was alive and had a living human heart, I didn't know what tears were, replied the statue. I lived in Central Park Palace, where sorrow is forbidden. During the day, I amused myself with my companions in the garden, and in the evening I danced in the main hall. The garden was surrounded by a high wall, and I never once thought to ask what was going on behind it. Everything around me was so luxurious. Mayor Jack, I was called by those close to me, and indeed I was happy, if only in pleasures as happiness. And so I lived, and so I died. And now that I am no longer alive, I have been placed up here on high. So high that I can see all the sorrows and all the poverty that is in my capital. And though my heart is tin now, I cannot refrain from tears. Ah, so you are not all gold, thought Swift, but of course not aloud, for she was polite enough. There, far away, in the alley I see a shabby house, continued the statue in a quiet, melodious voice. One window is open, and I can see a woman sitting by the table. Her face is haggard, her hands are calloused and red and needle-studded, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering passion flowers on the silk dress of the Queen's fairest maid of honor for the next court ball. And in her bed, close to the corner, is her sick child. Her boy lies feverish and begs for oranges. The mother has nothing but river water, and so this boy cries, "Swift, Swift, little Swift, will you take the ruby from my sword? My feet are chained to my pedestal, and I am unable to move from my seat." "They are waiting for me in Egypt," replied Swift. "My friends are circling the Nile and talking to the lush lotuses. Soon they will fly to the tomb of the great king for the night. There he himself, Pharaoh, rests in his magnificent coffin. He is wrapped in yellow cloths and embalmed with fragrant herbs. His neck is wrapped in a pale green jade chain, and his hands are like autumn leaves. Swift, Swift, little Swift, stay here for one night only and be my messenger. The boy is so thirsty and his mother is so sad. I'm not very fond of boys. Last summer, when I lived above the crayfish, the miller's children, wicked boys, threw stones at me. Of course, where would they hit them? We swallows are too dodgy. Besides, my kind is famous for swiftness, and yet I think there is little reverence in this throwing of stones. Mayor Jack was so sad, however, that Swift felt sorry for him. "It's very cold here," she said, "but that's all right. I'll stay with you this night and be on your parcels." "Thank you, little Swift," said Mr. Jack, and so Swift pecked a large ruby from Mayor Jack's sword and flew with it over the city roofs. She flew over the cathedral bell tower, where the white marble statues of angels. She flew over the royal palace and heard the sounds of dancing. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony, and with her, her lover. "What a wonder of these stars," her lover said to her, "and what a wonder of the power of love." "I hope my dress will be in time for the court ball," she answered him. "I had it embroidered with passion flowers, but the seamstresses are so lazy." She flew over the crayfish and saw the lights on the ship's masts. She flew over the ghetto and saw the old Jews making deals among themselves and weighing coins on the copper scales. And at last she flew to a shabby house and looked in. The boy was thrashing about in the heat, and his mother was sound asleep. She was so weary. Swift crept into the den and laid the ruby on the table, beside the seamstress's thimble. Then she began to whirl silently over the boy, bringing a chill to his face. "How chilly it has made me," said the child. "Then I shall soon be well." And he fell into a pleasant doze, and Swift went back to Mayor Jack and told him all about it. "And strange," she added, "though it is cold, I am not cold at all." "That is because you have done a good deed," explained Mayor Jack. and Swift thought about it, but immediately dozed off. As soon as she thought about it, she fell into a doze. At dawn, she flew to the river to bathe. A strange, inexplicable phenomenon, said the professor of ornithology, who was passing over the bridge at the time. Swift, in the middle of winter. And he printed a lengthy letter to the editor about it in one of the local newspapers. Everyone quoted the letter. It was filled with words that none understood. To Egypt tonight, thought Swift, and at once she was cheerful. She looked all over the city, every public monument, and sat for a long time on the spire of the cathedral bell tower. Wherever she went, the sparrows would chirp, "What a stranger! What a stranger!" and called her a noble foreigner, which was extremely flattering to her. When the moon rose, Swift returned to Mayor Jack. "Have you no errands for Egypt?" she asked loudly. "I'm leaving right away." "Swift, Swift, little Swift," said Mayor Jack. "Stay one night only." "I am expected in Egypt," replied Swift. "Tomorrow my friends will fly to the second rapids of the Nile. There the hippopotamuses lie in the reeds, and on a great granite throne sits the god Apollo. All night long he gazes at the stars, and when the daybreak shines, he greets it with a joyous shout. At noon, the yellow lions come down to the river for a watering hole. Their eyes are green beryls, and their roar is louder than the roar of a waterfall." "Swift, Swift, little Swift," said Mayor Jack. "I see a young man in the attic, far away in the country. He is bent over a table, over papers. Before him are wilted violets. His lips are scarlet as pomegranates. His black hair is curly and his eyes are dreamy. He is in a hurry to finish his play for the director of the theater, but he is too chilled. The fire has finished in his hearth, and he is deprived of his senses from hunger." "All right, I'll stay with you till morning," Swift said to Mayor Jack. She had in fact a good heart. "Where have you got the other ruby?" "I have no more rubies, alas," said Mayor Jack. "My eyes are all that is left. They are made of rare sapphires and were brought from India 1,000 years ago. Turn one of them out and take it to that man. He'll sell it to the jeweler and buy himself some food and firewood and finish his play." "Dear Jack, I won't do that." And Swift began to cry. "Swift, Swift, little Swift, do my will." So Swift pecked out Mayor Jack's eye and flew to the poet's dwelling. It was not hard for her to get in, for the roof was a hole. The young man sat with his hands over his face and did not hear the fluttering of his wings. Only then did he notice the sapphire in a bunch of wilted violets. "But I am beginning to be appreciated, he shouted joyfully. "This is from some noble admirer. Now I can finish my play." And happiness was on his face. And in the morning, Swift went to the harbor. She sat on the mast of a large ship and watched from there as sailors unloaded ropes from the hold of some boxes. "Huddle up, faster," they shouted as the crates went up. "And I'm going to Egypt," Swift told them, but no one paid any attention to her. Only in the evening, when the moon rose, did she return to Jack. "I guess it's goodbye now," she shouted from afar. "Swift, Swift, little Swift," echoed Mayor Jack. "Won't you stay till morning?" "It is winter now," replied Swift, "and it will soon snow cold here. But in Egypt the sun is warm on the green palms, and the crocodiles are stretched out in the mud, looking lazily around. My girlfriends are already nesting in the Baalbek temple, and white and pink doves are watching them and cooing. Sweet Jack, I cannot stay, but I will never forget you, and when spring comes, I will bring you 2 precious stones from there, from Egypt, in place of the ones you gave. Instead of a scarlet rose, thou shalt have a ruby, and a sapphire bluer than a wave." "Down on the boulevard," said Mayor Jack, "there's a little girl with matches. She dropped them in the ditch, and they've gone bad, and her father will kill her if she comes back without money. She's crying. She has neither shoes nor stockings, and her head is uncovered. Take out my other eye and give it to the girl, and her father won't touch her." "I can stay with you," replied Swift, "but I can't peck out your eye, for then you would be blind." "Swift, Swift, little Swift," said Mayor Jack, "do my will." And little Swift pecked out Jack's eye again and flew up to the girl and dropped a treasure in her hand. "What a beautiful glass!" exclaimed the little girl, and laughing ran home. Swift returned to Jack. "Now that you are blind, I will stay with you on the Yuki." "No, my dear Swift," replied the unhappy Jack. "You must go to Egypt." "I will stay with thee forever," said Swift, and fell asleep at his feet. And in the morning she sat on his shoulder all day and told him what she had seen in faraway lands, of the pink ibises that stand in a long phalanx along the Nile shore, and with their beaks catch goldfish, of the Sphinx, old as the world, who lives in the desert and knows everything, of the merchants who walk slowly beside their camels with amber marks in their hands, of the king of the moon mountains, who is black as ebony and worships a large piece of crystal, of the great green serpent sleeping in a palm tree. It takes 20 priests to feed him with honey gingerbread, of the pygmies, who float on flat, broad leaves on the lake and are always fighting with butterflies. "My dear Swift," said Mr. Jack, "you tell me many wonderful things, but the most wonderful thing in the world is human suffering. There is no miracle more wonderful than need. Fly over my city, my dear, and tell me all you see there." And Swift flew over the capital and saw how, in the opulent chambers of the rich rejoice, and the poor sit at their doorstep. In the dark nooks and crannies she visited, and saw the pale faces of emaciated children, looking sadly into the black street. Under the bridge, 2 little boys lay huddled together, trying to keep warm. "We are hungry," they repeated. "You're not supposed to lie here," the watchman shouted at them. Again they went out into the rain. Swift went back to Jack and told him what she had seen. "I'm all gilded," said Mayor Jack. "Take the gold off me, leaf by leaf, and give it to those who need it. People think there's happiness in gold while they live." Leaf by leaf, Swift stripped the gold from the statue until Mayor Jack was dull and faded. Leaf by leaf, she gave his pure gold to the poor, and children's cheeks grew rosy, and children began to laugh and play in the streets. "We have bread," they shouted. Then came the snow, and after the snow came the frost. The streets were like silver, sparkling and glittering. Icicles like crystal daggers hung from the roofs of the houses. Everyone wrapped themselves in fur coats, and boys in red caps skated on the ice. Swift, poor thing, was shivering and freezing. But Jack would not leave, for she loved him very much. She furtively picked up crumbs from the baker and flapped her wings to keep warm. But finally she realized it was her time to die. She was the only one who had the strength to climb onto Jack's shoulder one last time. "Goodbye, dear Jack," she whispered. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" "I'm glad you're going to Egypt at last," replied Mayor Jack. "You have stayed here too long, but you must kiss me on the lips, because I love you." "It is not to Egypt that I am going," replied Swift. "I am going to the abode of death. Are not death and sleep cousins?" And she kissed Mayor Jack on the mouth and fell dead at his feet. And at the same moment there was a terrible cracking sound inside the statue, as if something had burst. It was the tin heart that split open. It was indeed a bitter cold. Early in the morning the city mayor was strolling down the boulevard, and with him the city councilors. Passing Jack's column, the mayor looked at the statue. "My God, "What a scumbag Mayor Jack has become," exclaimed the mayor. "That's right, that's exactly what he is," echoed the city councilors, always agreeing with the head, and they approached the statue to examine it. "The ruby is gone from his sword. His eyes have fallen out and the gilding is gone," continued the mayor. "He is worse than any beggar." "Exactly. Worse than a beggar," confirmed the city councilors. "And there's a dead bird lying at his feet. We should issue a decree. Birds are not allowed to die here." And the clerk of the city council immediately put the motion in the book, and they toppled the statue of Mayor Jack. "There is no more beauty in him, and therefore no more use," said a professor of aesthetics at the university. And they melted the statue in a crucible, and the mayor called the city council and decided what to do with the metal. "Let's make a new statue," suggested the mayor, "and let this new statue represent me." "Me," said each councilman, and they all began to quarrel. I've heard of them recently. They're still quarreling today. "Amazing," said the chief foundryman. "This broken tin heart doesn't want to melt in the furnace. We must throw it away." And they threw it into the heap of rubbish where Swift was lying dead. And the Lord commanded his angel, "Bring me the most precious thing you find in this city." And the angel brought him a tin heart and a dead bird. "You have chosen rightly," said the Lord, "for in my gardens of paradise this little bird will now be forever and ever, and in my golden palace Mayor Jack will praise me."